This is an APA overview by Courtney Forness in October 2014. So the first question many people ask is why cite? There are two main reasons, one being professional and two for academic integrity. The first one, for being professional, it represents the amount of work that you've done when you cite all of your sources properly. It also notes that you're giving credit to other people's work because you are using other sources and other authors to compile your papers. For academic integrity, in order to not get in trouble for plagiarizing, you need to be citing the sources when you're using them. They also can be a great resource. Citations can be a great resource. For example, if you're using a dissertation for finding ideas or looking for evidence, going to their citations is a great way to link to another source that can give you more knowledge and more information for your paper. When to cite? You should be citing when you're paraphrasing, quoting, or referencing someone else's work. When in doubt, cite. The resources that you should be using for citations are the APA manual in the 6th edition. The OWL Purdue website is also extremely helpful. And I want to give you a fair warning to be careful with citation making products. While there are some great ones out there, like I know even Microsoft Word has one, and people use Perla and some other ones, be careful because even if it is accurate in formulating the citation itself and the references, if you mistype one comma, anything in there, it's going to duplicate that error over and over and over again. So please, when in doubt, use your APA manual. Some general rules for in-text citations for anything with authors is what we're going to start with first. So what you want to focus on is that you have your author or authors first, and the year published, and a page number if you're quoting, and the period always goes after parentheses. So for the example that you'll see here, we have our sentence, only later in the mid-18th century did arithmetic become an admissions standard. We have our open parenthesis, Cohen, the ampersand for and, Kisker, a comma, and the year it was published, followed by the close parenthesis and a period. So here there's two authors, so that's why we have both names and the and. You can also embed your citation. So look at the next example. We have Cohen and Kisker, and then we put our year published in parentheses following, stated that arithmetic was added as an admission standard later in the mid-18th century. It's a nice way to switch up your paper and really add some variety in your sentences, especially if you're using a lot of evidence-based research. Also note that if you're directly quoting, an in-text citation should look like this. And look at the example where you have your parenthesis, your authors, your comma, your year published, another comma, and then the letter P, a period, and your page number, followed by your close parenthesis and your period. Never page, never type out page, never PG. It's always just a P and a period. Some other general rules on authors. For 1 to 2 authors, it's going to look like the following. That first example there that we have the parenthesis, Cohen and Kisker, comma, the year published 2010, and parenthesis and a period. If it's 3 to 5 authors, you're going to list them all out the first time that you put them in an in-text citation. So you have your parenthesis, all 5 names. Notice that between the 4th and 5th author's last name, you're going to have a comma and the ampersand there. Always it's going to look like that, even though it's not first nature. That's what you need to include. Then another comma after the last author's name, the year published, and the end parenthesis with a period. The next time that you use that source, those authors, again for an in-text citation, you're going to use the first author's name, followed by et al., and the year published. Note the rules here that you do not put a comma after the author's name. You put his last name, et al., period, comma, and then the year published. If you have more than a source that's more than 6 authors, you're going to use et al. Right away. You're not going to list all 6 or 10 or 15. You're going to use the first author's last name, et al., period, comma, year published, right away. You are going to come across some sources that have unknown authors or organizations as authors, and that's going to change the way that you do your in-text citations. So the first example here, we have a book or report with no author. So what you see is inside your parenthesis, you have the title of the book or report, a comma, and the year published still. And there's two ways to do this. You can italicize the title of the book or report, or you can underline it. Can't do both, have to choose one or the other. Notice you still have the year published in there, and if you were quoting from it, you would just put a comma after the year published, P dot, and your page number. The second example is an article, chapter, or a web page with no author. And here notice you've got your parentheses again, and you have the title of that article, chapter, or web page, and that is going to be in quotations. Note the comma is before the end quotation, and again you have your year published. And if you were quoting, you would put the page number following the year published with the comma, P dot. Let's say it was page 10, and put that in there. The third example here is the organization as an author. Note in the first sentence, try to note it in the first sentence, the Department of Education, parenthesis, 2009, end parenthesis, published a report in 2010 which showed, and finish your sentence. So you want to first put it in, embed it in there, and then in subsequent citations you can do your sentence, and then at the end of your sentence you'll have your parenthesis, Department of Education, your year published, and your end parenthesis. So now we are going to move on to your reference list and how to formulate your reference list. It's important to note that the most common references that you're going to use for scholarly research should be journal articles, books, occasionally dissertations, but very rarely web pages. It's important to make sure that the web pages you are using are scholarly or evidence-based or research. Some general rules for your reference list. This example is going to be one author, and that's going to be a journal article. So if you note here that we start initially with our last name, followed by a comma and the first initial, middle initial. If there's no middle initial given, it's fine to omit it. Then notice that we have the published date, in parentheses again, followed by a period, and we have a title of our article here next. Now notice the title of the actual article itself is not italicized, and that nothing is capitalized other than that first letter of that first word in the title. After that, you're going to have a period again, and you're going to have your name of your actual journal here. That is going to be italicized, and that you're going to capitalize every appropriate capitalization word. You're going to follow that with a comma and the volume number if given. The volume number is also going to be italicized, and that's going to be followed by the edition, which may or may not be there. Like it said, if it's not there, omit it, but if it's there, you need to include it. Notice that the edition is not italicized. Followed again by a comma, and then the page numbers, followed by a period. You do not have to put P dot here, you're just going to put your page range. And if you did find this article online, you would include the DOI or the web address, and I will show you that in a couple slides. Now, for 2 to 7 authors, it's going to look a little different just because we have to make sure that we're including the rest of the authors' names. So if you'll note, we're starting here with the last name again, first initial, middle initial, with a comma, followed by the ampersand, and then our second author's last name, comma, first initial, middle initial. If this was a journal article, you would do it the same way. If it was 3 authors, you would have a comma, no ampersand, the next person's name, comma, and then an ampersand. There's always going to be that comma and ampersand before the last author you're mentioning. This example in particular is of a book. So we're going to have our published date like the rest of them, but then instead, if you noted in the journal article, the title of the journal article itself was not italicized. Well, here, if it's a book, you're going to italicize the entire title of that book. Notice though the capitalization rules here. The T is capitalized on the, but shaping and the rest isn't, except for when we have that semicolon right in the middle of our title, the next letter after that semicolon is going to be capitalized again. So emergence is capitalized, and then it goes back to all lowercase. Now you'll also see though that we have the word American in our title, and we did capitalize that. You're going to always capitalize proper names. So if there's a proper name in there, you're going to still capitalize that name. So after the title of our book, if it's anything other than the first edition, you have to include what edition it is, and that's going to immediately follow the title. So before the period, you're going to put a parenthesis, just like this. So second ed with a period, close your parenthesis, and then another period. If it was third, you'd put third ed, period, fourth, etc. Then again, we're going to have our publisher location this time because it is a book. And for this example in particular, I'm talking about a hardcover book that you would find in a library. We have our city, comma, our state, our semicolon, and our publisher, followed by a period. So for an online journal or periodical, it's going to look very similar to what we've been seeing so far. You'll notice a trend in the way that we're displaying the author's names and the way that the published date comes right after the author's name and the way that the title of the article that you're looking at comes immediately following. So there is a little bit of similarity between the types of sources you're going to be referencing, but there are some key differences to make sure that you are paying attention to in your reference list to make sure you get all of the appropriate points in your papers and that you're citing correctly. So for an online journal or periodical, you're going to have your authors again, so note those same rules we've been using the whole time, followed by your date, followed by your title of article. Notice that because it's a journal this time again, we are not italicizing the title of the article, but notice that our A at admissions is capitalized and the A in America is capitalized. Then we have a period, and we have the title of our journal here, which is admissions, so it's in italics. We have our volume number, but in this one there was not an issue number, so we just omit that. Notice that the volume number is still italicized, and then you have the page range, followed by the period. Because this was online, you need to include the DOI if given. Many journal online articles nowadays do have DOIs, so that would be the first choice if you're including that. So after the period, you're going to put DOI, a semicolon, and the numbers as listed in the journal itself. Or if that's not there, you're going to use the web address. So copy and paste the HTTP that's there. This isn't going to be on the second line down. It's just doing that because it couldn't fit on the line ahead of it. So it would just be right after the period, you'd do a space, and then you'd either put your DOI or your HTTP address. Now remember how before we had talked about in-text citations for using a source that did not have an author or had an organization as author or a web page. This is an example of one way to cite that. So we're using in a web page with an organization as an author. So we have the organization itself in the place where the author would go in our reference list. So we have Department of Education, followed by the date again. And note that some web pages in particular are not going to have updated dates on each page you're looking at where you might pull a source from. So if you cannot find the date, it is okay to, in your parenthesis, you still have to include the parenthesis there like you're going to put a date, but you can put N period, D period, and parenthesis for no date, and that is acceptable. Following the date, you're going to have the title of the article or web page, and that is going to be italicized and capitalized. So note this one was Truancy Statistics, followed by a period, and then a space, and right after that you're going to put retrieved from, and your URL is going to go in there. Now we're going to move on to paper formatting and how to format a proper APA paper. So the first thing to note is that you need to have a cover page, and you need to have a running header. So if you'll notice on the right hand side here, I have a sample of what a running head looks, even though it is quite small. On that top line you have the words running head. The R is capitalized, the rest of it is not. And then you have a semicolon followed by the title of your paper or an abbreviated title of your paper. If your title is too long, you need to shorten that up, and I believe it needs to be 45 words or less. And that's going to be in all capitalization. And your page number is going to appear on that first page. Then in the middle of your paper, you're going to have the title of your paper, followed by your name, followed by the university. Some professors might ask you to include things like the date, the title of their course, the title of the project, and additional items. That it is up to professor discretion, and that's okay. But if they do not note that they want those things included, then you need to make sure that you're only including what APA says you should include, which is the title, your name, the university name, and that running head. You're always going to have an abstract unless the teacher notes they do not need an abstract or they do not want you to have an abstract. And you're always going to have a references page, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So here's a Microsoft tutorial on how to insert your header. The first thing is, in Microsoft Word, you need to go to the Insert tab, which is the second one in from home across the top, and you're going to see an insert header. Click on header, and you notice that this new menu comes up. Check the box that says different first page, and then start typing in your first page header, which remember you're going to have running head, capital R, the rest lowercase, the semicolon, and then the title of your paper in all caps. Then you're going to keep your cursor where it is, so keep it following the R right on there. Click on the Insert tab again. This time though, you're going to click Page Number, Current Position, and click that first option. And then notice that your page number is going to immediately be right behind your R. You're going to put your cursor before the number though, so just go one space back. Don't backspace, but maybe use your left arrow or use the mouse and put your cursor there, and tab that number over to the right-hand corner. Then you're done. However, remember that we still need to do the rest of the pages, and they're going to look a little different. So you need to basically just tab down and get to your next page, and then you're going to double click in the header area. It'll automatically put you there. You're going to type the title of your paper, no running head this time since you're not on that first piece of paper, all capital letters, and then do the same thing with the page number. Keep your cursor where it is, click Insert tab again, Page Number, Current Position, check that first option, and notice again the number goes immediately following. And this time you'll notice that the number is 2. It automatically knows you're on the second page. Then you've got to put your cursor before that number and tab it over to the right-hand corner. And now you'll notice that every next page you get to, you'll have your title as it should be, in all caps on the left-hand side of every page, and you're going to have your page number on every page. So what is an abstract? An abstract is what immediately follows your cover page. It's not an introduction, but should be a concise yet comprehensive summary. It's typically about half a page, double-spaced with no indenting. And depending on what type of paper you're writing, you can use the APA manual as a guide for what to include. It's actually on page number 25 in your APA manual, and it gives a nice synopsis of, depending on what type of paper, key points to hit in your abstract. And if you're not sure that you need an abstract, ask your instructor or create one. It's better to be over formal than under formal. Here we have provided an abstract example from the OWL Purdue sample paper, where again you see that the running head is across the top of the paper with the page number. The word abstract is going to be there centered, and then you have the actual abstract itself. Notice that there's no indentation. You have citations in there if appropriate. And at the bottom of the abstract, you'll note that there's something that says keywords and that's italicized. Those are optional to include. Typically, they're included in longer research articles for help finding, basically as keywords for the reader to note that the paper will be touching on. They're not mandatory. Another important part of a proper APA paper is formatting your headings. So make sure that you pay attention to the levels. This slide can be a great resource for making sure that you properly level your headings and have the correct ones throughout your paper. Headings can be a great way to organize your own thoughts in the paper and help the reader know what topic you're going to be talking about, what section it's coming under. Some general writing tips for APA. APA is formal writing, so you need to be using third person and avoiding the I or you, so no first or second person, unless your instructor specifically says they are okay with that or they want you to include it. You also want to avoid contractions. You may not be using can't, don't, shouldn't. You need to be spelling out the words, so it should be cannot or do not or should not. You also want to avoid unnecessary fluff words and be concise with your writing, be concise with your sentences. So some guidelines for reference lists. It's important to note that your reference page needs to be alphabetized. So you go according to that first author of all your references, alphabetize them, and the first line of each reference is going to be flush with that left margin, and every line after that, second and subsequent of each of the same reference, is going to be indented, so just by tabbing once. It's really important to see what this looks like, so we're going to look at the sample APA paper from the OWL Purdue website. So from the example here, from the sample page provided by OWL Purdue, you'll notice that on your reference page, this is what it should look like. You'll have your running header, all capitals, still across the top with the page number, the word references centered, and then you'll have your actual references themselves. Note that they are alphabetized, and also note the indentation of that second and subsequent lines of each reference. So remember, when in doubt, cite your sources. And please note that this presentation was meant to be an overview of how to do in-text citations and references, and that there are going to be one-off sources that don't quite match anything that we talked about today. So you need to be using your APA manual for those. I hope this has helped, and good luck with your citations in APA.